Hey everyone, it's Rich from Plant-Based Rich Podcast. I'm joined here today with my friend Andy Larson, who lost an incredible amount of weight, over 100 pounds, following a Nutritarian diet. He has been one of his idols has been Dr. Fuhrman, and he's a hero of mine as well. And we're both honored to have him here as a guest today. Welcome, Dr. Fuhrman.
Thank you. Looking forward to our talk today.
So my first question is about vitamin D. I hear from different sources that maybe you should take K2, and I don't know what your recommendations are with that. Do you think is it just adequate to take D3, or do you always need K2 as well?
I do take the K2. I make a multivitamin for men and women. I put K2 into it because of the research showing that it's been effective for bone density with aging and to prevent calcification. So it seems to be a good thing. We don't know 100% for sure because maybe we're eating so healthfully, maybe the good bacteria in the gut can convert enough of the K1 into K2. So the additional K2, may not be necessary in a person eating as healthfully as we're eating. But I don't have any data to prove that. It would just be a hypothesis. But as far as, a lot of the research seems to think that there's a benefit to K2, and it's not something prevalent in most people's diets. So we add it to the multi just to make sure we're getting everything,
I did find
my
out
viewpoint on, and of course you guys probably realize that this this feeling of nutrient levels, we want the most diverse amount of nutrients, the most broad spectrum array, not being deficient in anything. But too little of something could be potentially harmful, and too much of something can also be harmful. So you want to hit that sweet spot in the midpoint of intake, and not just think because something is good, then more of it's better. So with something like vitamin D, we want to make sure we hit the sweet spot, but we don't want to just take it extra, because I do see a lot of people taking doses of vitamin D that are too high and their blood levels are too high. And I don't recommend that either. So we recommend the same thing with, many things. We're trying to hit that most beneficial point of intake and not just think more is better. But yeah, I think taking some extra K2, but not a huge amount, is
and I just found out that
sensible.
kimchi has K2 in a lot of fermented foods, which I didn't realize.
I think NATO has kimchi. Kimchi is just so high in salt.
Yeah,
It's
that's
not
what I worry about as
not a
well.
food that's reasonable to recommend to people to eat for the K2 anyway. So it's just a very heavily salted product.
Right. Thank you. Andy?
Yeah, hi, Dr. Fuhrman. It's great to meet you. I just was gonna say that, what really drew me to you, I met you, I feel like I know you because I've read your books and I've seen all your videos, but it was the PBS documentary um a number of years ago. In 2012, I was 290 pounds and I'm only 5'8". So I feel like there was some other influences as well, but you were kind of my main influence, and I lost well over 100 pounds and kept the weight off. And I just wanted to thank you for being an inspiration. And I think probably the biggest thing about you was that you're just someone that has such high expectations, and that really impressed me, because you hear people say, well, it's okay, have a little bit of this, or you got to live, and you got to enjoy yourself and this and that, and you just kind of have like a no tolerance policy for bread and just donuts and just junk that people eat. And so that's kind of how I've adopted my lifestyle, is there's certain things I just don't eat anymore. But anyway, I just wanted to get that out of the way. And my father, who is recently went to the doctor, and he miraculously, in St. Cloud, Minnesota, his doctor said, I want you to read a book called Eat to Live. And he read it, and because his doctor said so, and he took it seriously, and so he's totally on board. And it's funny because I told him to read it a number of years ago, and he didn't listen to me at the time. But so the word is spreading. So my father read Eat to Live. So what does he do? He gives it to my uncle, who really needed it, and he read it, and he's eating the vegetables. And now he bought a copy for my aunt. So my whole family is reading your book, and the word is out in rural Minnesota, at least in the Larson family. So But the question that I have for you is, my uncle said to me, um, I read that book. Why don't all the doctors tell you to do what this guy says to do in this book? And I wanted to hear your response.
Well, first of all, let me comment on one of your first comments, was that people who dabble in unhealthy food and baby step their way into healthy eating, they generally don't succeed in getting the weight off and keeping it down, because it's like it's like an alcoholic dabbling in alcohol on the weekends, or a smoker wanting to smoke during the week. It just maintains their attraction for those unhealthy substances. And why should a person be their own worst enemy? Why should you consume things that are not in your best interest, that are harmful to yourself? If a person wants to keep consuming something that's going to hurt their health and longevity and their brain function, that's called an addict. Because if you're not an addict, you'd be pursuing food and pursuing behaviors that are good for you, that protect your health and your life and your happiness. So self-destructive behavior should never be condoned. Is just enjoy yourself with food and just eat whatever you want. Oh, that's too strict. That's too radical. But because I've been doing this for almost more than 35 years already, and what I'm saying is that the people that jump in with both feet and really take it seriously get the best results, but they also learn, their taste muscle rebuilds itself. They learn to prefer eating this way. And the people who keep dabbling in the highly palatable, highly sweetened, salted, fried foods, greasy foods, they never give up. They never retrain their taste buds to prefer the healthy diet. So they're always under stress deciding if they should eat healthy or not, because they still prefer those foods because didn't stay away from them long enough to lose their attraction to them. So I don't, what's the word? I'm not attracted to those foods. They're disgusting to me. And they almost make me feel like you couldn't get 10 men to tie me down to shove a donut or a pizza or a hamburger in my mouth, or to shove a cup of Coke down my throat. I'd be fighting them off like you're trying to shoot me up with heroin against my will. Right. Why would I want to do that? I'm not that stuff. I just look at it as being, toxic poison, and it is. White flour products are not food. They're drugs. And they addict the brain, and they change the way you think, and they dummy down your ability to think intelligently and creatively. But that put aside, why don't doctors do this? Well, the medical profession didn't evolve really. It evolved as an arm of the pharmaceutical companies to distribute drugs. And in medical school, you learn a lot about healthcare, but your healthcare is oriented towards either surgical techniques or drugs. So the average physician doesn't know more about nutrition and health, maintaining good health, than the average truck driver, postman, or librarian. And if they did, they would live a lot longer, but they don't. Doctors don't have any, let's say, monopoly or authority on lifestyle medicine and longevity medicine. It's my specialty, of course, and there is a growing specialization in medicine called a board-certified lifestyle medicine physician. And the American College of Lifestyle Medicine has grown in the last 2 decades. And there are thousands of physicians who are members. But there's so many physicians that, you wouldn't even, their opinion on nutrition is relatively worthless. That said, I have to give credit where credit is due, and be grateful for all the doctors that recommend my books to their patients and that that live this way for their own good health. Because when doctors are interviewed, for what books do they recommend the most to their patients? And there's been a study on that, and it was done with the American College of Lifestyle Medicine. My books came out #1 as the books that doctors most recommend to their patients. So I'm really proud of that, and proud of the hundreds of the people across the country who's recovered their health or avoided health tragedy because their physicians have recommended my work. So even though the majority of the medical profession is still just being a drug dispensary system, there is still a growing army of doctors who are embracing nutrition and lifestyle medicine. It's just not the most commonplace right now. What's funny in society today, we have a growing amount of healthier people, and we have a growing amount of unhealthier people as the population expands and grows. So, Maybe it's a little higher percent of healthier people. It's only 2.4% of the American population, 2.4% that eat relatively healthfully and exercise regularly. That means like 97% are still living on the junk, a harmful diet, and are overweight or they're thin because they're sick.
Right.
So most normal weight people are sickly. It's only a small percent of the normal weight people that are really healthy.
So I was thrilled when he said, this doctor told me to read a book called Eat to Live by this guy, Dr. Joel Fuhrman. I was like, great to have you aboard, Dad.
Yeah. And of course, he's recommending my most famous book, Eat to Live, but it's still a little bit outdated. My most recent book is Eat for Life, which has more updated references. And you can see the evolution of my thinking from Eat to Live to Eat to Life, because maybe Eat to Live is a little more permissive in allowing people to go out to have a little bit of this and a little bit of that. And I really don't feel that way. I think that's foolish for people to utilize that, to play around with those dangerous foods that just trap them and make it more difficult to stay on the diet. Right. So I think over the years, I've realized over many decades that the people that have the best long-term benefits are the ones who did it most strictly, not the ones who dabble in it. You know what I mean?
Right, for sure.
I think it's a good starter book. And he actually, I think, did get The End of Diabetes. And I think they're going to be wanting to read more as they go because they really like that. So it's a good starter book. So Absolutely. Go ahead, Rich.
Yeah. Absolutely.
To talk about what Andy was saying with his dad, unfortunately, my dad was diagnosed with giant cell arteritis. I don't know if you're familiar with that.
Sure.
And I told him many times, he should try, try being Nutritarian. And he never got interested. So I love hearing stories like Andy's that his doctor recommended it, because if only my dad would find a doctor who would recommend the book, maybe he would listen to him instead of me. But anyway, I see so many people in my family who are eating that way, unlike my mom, who did reverse her diabetes because she ate this way. But so many other people in my family, I see them taking tons of meds. And I just wonder your thoughts specifically about my dad with giant cell arteritis. Have you had any patients who recover from that if they eat this way?
I've seen a huge amount of patients, over those years, even though right now I'm not seeing patients full time, but I've seen a huge amount of people with pericarditis, cardiomyopathies who are told reversal, arteritis and polymyositis and all types of autoimmune conditions, and seen remarkable recoveries that even astounded me. Right. Even before they invented the drugs for hepatitis C, I had patients that made full recoveries from hepatitis C with no medications. So you'd be amazed. I've seen people make recovery from asthma, and so many that got well from multiple sclerosis, and so many people have gotten well from ulcerative colitis, rheumatoid arthritis, all types of serious autoimmune conditions, including lupus. I had one woman who was on the National Renal Transplant list waiting for a new kidney with a creatinine of 4.2. And she got rid of her lupus and her kidney function went back to a creatinine of 0.8. I know you're not maybe familiar with the numbers if you're not a doctor, but most doctors would think it once your creatinine is 4.2, your kidney is shot and you're never recovering from that. Right. And she needs kidney transplant, but she made a complete recovery. And I've seen, that keeps my passion and my thrill of being a doctor.
Oh, I'm sure.
I can't even understand how regular doctors, when do they burn out? And, and because they don't really see people get well. You give them medications and they deteriorate. And most of the medications increase risk of cancer anyway. So people, and they don't ever think you're going to get off medications. You start people on drugs for diabetes, high blood pressure. They're on those drugs for the rest of their lives.
Yeah, exactly.
Whereas my profession that I get into is completely different. I'm taking people off the drugs, getting them well so they don't need drugs, and watching people's diseases go away. So yeah, your father missed a huge opportunity. Right. Instead, he's going to be on drugs that shorten his lifespan and create cancer. Steroids and Plaquenil and methotrexate and drugs that are dangerously, particularly dangerous. So it's tremendously foolish of him, but it's not his fault because society, that's where, because people are a product of the society they live in.
Yeah.
And the norm of society and all the doctors and everybody he knows is going to say, well, that's ridiculous. Of course you got to take the drugs. You can't, so we're a small, voice crawling out in the wilderness. Don't take the medication.
Right.
Go, you can get well. And why should he believe us? Why
Right.
should he believe you? You're not, you're never a hero in your own hometown, so.
What's interesting is I sometimes wonder about the psychology of it all because, here I'm the only one in the family who would ever rebel against the doctor, I guess you could say, because I didn't want to go on meds. Everybody else is just fine. I've heard people tell me that, oh, they would just take the meds instead of doing what I did.
Yeah.
It's interesting how some people have the mindset and others just don't.
And doctors they don't really tell people the risks of the medications either.
No.
They're minimized, like the statins that cause diabetes and it causes weight gain and reduce exercise tolerance, and the blood pressure medications that lower your diastolic too low could cause atrial fibrillation, and it could cause even increased risk of a heart attack from the excessive use of, and the diabetic medications that cause weight gain and accelerate the progression of your diabetes, and the high blood pressure medications that are linked to cancer, like calcium channel blockers. And so, the first thing you learn in medical school is the toxicity of all drugs and how cumulatively and synergistically they increase the risk of cancer by taking medications, but particularly the drugs that rheumatologists use for autoimmune conditions.
Right.
Those are the most cancer promoting and should definitely shorten people's lifespan. If you could get well from an autoimmune condition and not take, biologic agents that are immunosuppressive medications, then you're much better off. So drugs should be really an emergency last resort.
Oh, for sure.
But, it's okay. We help those that want the help, and there's enough people that want this type of help. And I've made a tremendously rewarding career out of helping people, and just so much personal satisfaction watching people get well and transform their life. Like you guys
can't change everybody, and
can't change everybody. The few people you can change is a blessing.
It's got to be very rewarding, I'm sure, for you.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah. Andy.
Yeah. So the next thing I had is. So, Dr. Fuhrman, if there's one thing you've impressed upon me, it's to eat flax seeds, greens, beans, basically all the G bombs. I hear you like in my head, like greens, like I eat greens every day. And, but the one food that I think is really important for weight loss is beans. And you've really impressed. Beans.
Beans, yeah, sure.
I think beans are so important for weight loss because they have so much fiber, they have resistant starch, and I just promote beans all the time, and I don't feel like people always listen to me. I have a Facebook page with a few followers, but and then just people in my everyday life, I just always tell people to eat beans, and that's one of the foods you've impressed upon me. And I just think you do such a great job of explaining why beans are so good for weight loss. And could you just talk a little bit about why eating high fiber foods, and also what is resistant starch and how does that work? And there's something about like the after meal effect that you talk about. You just do that so well. So could you tell us why beans are such a great thing for weight loss?
Right. Well, when we're going to eat food, the question is, what food should we eat? And what's the foods that are going to best affect our long-term health? And what food is going to make us most satisfied, so we're not going to feel like we have to eat again in an hour and get hungry again right away? And beans, because they have the most slowly digestible carbohydrates, means they release their glucose into the bloodstream very slowly over hours, not over minutes. So they keep you really stable as far as your energy level. So you're not hungry for many hours after eating them. But also because they have such slowly digestible carbohydrates, they don't require the body to produce a lot of insulin to get the glucose out of the blood. So there's the excess amount of insulin that is the primary fat storage hormone that promotes fat storage and also increases appetite and also increases risk of cancer. So I could say that high levels of insulin in response to a high glycemic load, like potato or rice or bread, the high insulin level is not a longevity promoting phenomenon. We want to keep the insulin low. So on a hierarchical scale of the slow digestibility of the starch, beans are at the top of the race, win the race. And then they not only have the most slowly digestible starches, but they also have the most fiber and the most resistant starch. Resistant starch is like a fiber, It's counted as calories, but those calories that enter the bloodstream, get into the digestive tract, don't get into the bloodstream because 90% of the resistant starch passes through into the toilet bowl. So you feel like you ate all those calories. Your brain gets a signal you ate the calories. You have your appetite and your appestat both getting signals. I have enough calories. I'm full. I don't need to eat anymore. But those calories never enter the bloodstream and go into your cells. They pass into the toilet bowl. But the combination of that 10% of the resistant starch that does enter the bloodstream as butyrate, which is a short-chain fatty acid, and the bacterial activity on the fiber in beans, increasing butyrate levels in the blood and in the brain, has an effect on the hypothalamus to reduce your appestat. So you can say this byproduct from bean consumption and from eating fiber in general has the most powerful effect at curbing the desire to move for more calories. But not only that, as you made a reference to, the beans, because they have so much probiotic effects, the fibers that good bacteria like to live on, and the resistant starch that like to support the growth of good bacteria in the gut, they create a thick biofilm or coating over the villi in the small intestines. And this bacterial coating over the villi, called the biofilm, now slows the absorption of glucose into the bloodstream from other foods you eat that aren't beans. So when you have oatmeal and a mango in the morning, the glycemic effect, the glycemic load of that mango and that oatmeal is blunted because of the thick coating of bacteria on the wall of the villi because you're a bean eater. And scientists call that the second meal effect. It means you benefit in future meals what you ate in previous meals. And I'm saying to people that this combination of green vegetables, beans, onions, mushrooms, beans, onions, mushrooms, green vegetables, that combination.
Berries and seeds.
Right? So we're talking about two raw foods. The two raw foods are raw green vegetables, both lettuce and the other raw food that's really important are scallions and onions, or green onion, the scallions and onions. And the two cooked foods are beans and mushrooms. And those four foods have a huge effect at benefiting the immune system. They support the growth of the intraepithelial lymphocytes that surround the digestive tract, that are the defenders at the gates of the castle, your primary immune defenders. But they also building up this microfilm that keeps your glucose low when you eat fruit too. And so we're building up the healthiest bacteria in the gut. And these healthy bacteria now, and the food and these nutrients in these foods have anti-angiogenic effects, anti-fat storage effects, and anti-inflammatory effects, compared to eating meats and sweets that have pro-inflammatory effects, pro-insulin effects, and pro-fat storage and cellular replication effects. So they promote, we could say but the surge of calories into the bloodstream all at once, the huge amount of calories that flowed in immediately after eating sweets, honey, maple syrup, white flour, and meats and oils stimulate the brain and make you dopamine insensitive and make you crave extra calories from these so the people that have this high caloric load in the bloodstream all at once makes you acclimate to and dependent on a high caloric load. You don't feel right with a normal amount of calories. You have to excessively eat calories because you're used to these calories flooding in and stimulating the brain centers in the same dopamine receptor areas that are stimulated by opiates and narcotics. And over time, the high stimulation of the huge caloric load from burgers and fries and sweets and meats and oils, you become dopamine insensitive, and the brain starts craving more calories. Even though you don't need any biologically and you're overeating and you're overweight, you still can't be comfortable unless you overly crave calories because you've so overstimulated the brain. So we're saying that these foods become addicting. And the prototypes of addictive foods are sweets and oils. Don't forget, most of America gets all their fat from animal fats and oils, whereas on a Nutritarian diet, we get our fats from nuts and seeds. And just like you mentioned beans, we mentioned all the calories in nuts and beans don't go into the body, don't go into the bloodstream of the body. You feel like you ate the calories, but you're satisfied, but they don't. Same thing with nuts and seeds. When nuts and seeds become your source of fat, you sense you ate that many calories and takes away your appestat, controls your appestat, lowers it, and satisfies your appetite as well. But all those calories never come into the bloodstream because a lot of those calories pass through into the toilet bowl. So it's this combination of green vegetables, beans, and nuts and seeds that blunt the appetite and make people satisfied, leaving lower amount of calories. And by the way, it also is consistent with the most, you could say, important scientific studies over the last 5 years, showing that more animal protein in the diet leads to shorter lifespans, the most early life deaths. Early life deaths generally defined as death before the age of 70. So we're saying the most early life death of the people with more animal protein in the diet, and the most later life deaths, people live past the age of 90 in good health, is linked to diets that are higher in plant protein, not animal protein. And the foods that are highest in plant protein are greens, beans, and nuts and seeds. Greens, those are the foods that lead to longevity the most too. They lead to a favorable weight, they make you satisfied with less calories, they're low glycemic, and they link to longer lifespans.
I love it. And the way you explain it, it makes me excited to eat these. I mean, I'm already on board, but it makes me excited to eat these foods and to keep eating these foods. So
Exactly.
thanks for explaining that.
Yeah.
Sure.
I had a question about omega-3, but before I get to that, you're talking about nuts and seeds. Are avocado in that same family? I mean, do they have that same effect on the body, or is avocado different?
They do have the same effect on the body, in the sense that you're absorbing the fat calories more slowly compared to nut and seed calories. But the nut and seed calories are more, there's more fat in the stool, so there's more caloric loss on nuts and seeds versus avocado, which is mostly all calorically absorbed. So it's not quite as weight loss favorable. If we're going to choose, if a person needs a lower calorie diet, we'll probably rather them still include some nuts and seeds, but but maybe eat less or
Right.
less avocado.
Right.
If they're, if it's like you or me, who's a highly active person who handles the extra calories, then the avocado is great. And I do serve some avocado here at my retreat, like once or twice a week, but we don't really have a lot of it. You know what I mean?
Right. Last time we talked about omega-3, and I understand the importance of it. But one of my questions is, do you have to take omega-3 every day, do you think? Or is the science out there how much people really need?
Well, that's the thing, is that it's one of those nutrients and substances that where the needs of people vary so greatly from person to person. So you can't come out with a statement that says everybody needs to take this much omega-3 for good health, because some people don't need that much, and some people need 4 times that much. You know what I mean?
So how would you know? Would you have to check lab work, or
yeah, the best way to do is to check your blood, because we've had a lot of studies come out lately showing that with omega-3 index above 6 leads to longer lifespans. And even having a omega-3 index below 4 was shown to increase the risk of early life death or 5-year loss of life, equated to the effects of cigarette smoking. So some vegans and some people are not taking in much omega-3 don't realize that they're damaging their long-term health from omega-3 deficiency. And the way to know that it was with a blood test. The omega-3 index is the name of the blood test. And I used to think that being above 4 was good enough, but now I see more studies show that a maximum lifespan occurs with numbers greater than that. And so we're talking about making sure people above 5 and maybe even above 6 is being beneficial. So I adjust the dose accordingly. And I sell an omega-3 supplement that we pack in glass and we keep in the refrigerator for my clients and patients, because a lot of the ones on the market are kept at room temperature, and you buy them in a health food store. They've been out in the room temperature for a year or more,
right.
and the oils can have some degree of rancidity. So I'm just trying to keep ours more fresh. So we're eating an oil that's a fresh oil, not an older oil. Because
do you think the flax oil is just as good? Or?
Well, flax oil is not a long chain omega-3. It's not EPA or DHA. It's short chain ALA. And the body can convert ALA into EPA and then DHA, but only a small percent, just 1 or 2%. So for most people, increasing flax seeds or flax oil does not drive their omega-3 index high. It just doesn't have, because they still don't have a lot of activity of that conversion enzyme. It's more of a genetically determined enzyme production.
I see.
As you know, oil is so fattening
and
so stimulating, so that most are and the flax oil really is not very effective at driving you have to take a huge amount, and even then you wouldn't get your omega-3 into the beneficial range. It's just safer to take a smaller amount of the right stuff, which is EPA and DHA.
Andy?
Yeah. So I think we touched on.
Have you guys, by the way, ever had your omega-3 index checked?
No, you made me want to do it though. I wanted to
I haven't.
finish
Now
my
I think
tea.
I should.
Yeah. And for people who can't get their doctors to do it locally, I do have like a card that you could get mail. We can mail you a card and you can put a drop of blood on it, like from a finger stick, and send it off to the lab, and the lab will give you the number. It's
Oh,
not
I'd
readily,
love to do that. Yeah,
you won't have it readily available to you, but I'm suggesting everybody should know their level at least,
yeah, definitely.
Good idea. The next one I have is we talked about probiotics just a little bit, but what I've kind of learned is probiotics is kind of a hot word in nutrition. And I see people are taking like probiotic tablets and they're eating sauerkraut and this and that. Um, and what I've kind of come to understand is it's really more important for the microbiome or the gut bacteria if we eat the high fiber foods that our gut bacteria actually likes to feast on. And that in turn is what, like, that's the important thing is to eat the good foods to feed her. Could you talk a little bit about how that works, Dr. Fuhrman?
Yeah, we were talking about that. Remember when I said those 4 foods about the greens and the mushrooms and the beans and the onions? We talk about all those good bacteria in the gut. That's the point. I mean, we used to think taking probiotics was such a good thing, but we learned over the years that the diversity of bacteria in the gut makes for healthier effects and a longer lifespan. And the diversity of bacteria is enhanced by the diversity of different types of plant fibers. So leading to, we want to have nutritional diversity, meaning not even one type of mushrooms. You should be eating multiple types of mushrooms, not even one type of green vegetables. You should be eating multiple types of green vegetables. So a Nutritarian diet does not emulate the blue zones. Most of the blue zones have very narrow choice of foods that are locally grown in that area, compared to a Nutritarian diet that enables us to have a wider variety of foods. Sure, there are some, bread baskets in the world, like like some parts like southern Italy where they can grow figs and peppers and and all kinds of foods, nuts and almonds, but still, in those areas the people are overweight and are overeating oil and white flour, and they're not examples of good health. I just came back from southern Italy. I took a retreat there, and I was amazed by almost everybody was so overweight. Well, even the people that were living in like ancient parts of the city and were growing their own food were still pouring oil over it and eating a lot of sweets and flour products with it. And they were all huge. I mean, I met a guy, I'm 68, almost 69, and I met a guy who was 62 who looked like my grandfather, who weighed about was about 50 to 75 pounds overweight. And he was growing vegetables and tomatoes and eating figs and eating healthy food, but he was eating so much unhealthy stuff with it. The point I'm making right now is that we have an unprecedented opportunity in human history right now to have this science of longevity that can blow the blue zones out of the water. We can live so much longer than our ancestors did. And we have access to such a huge variety of natural foods, even organically grown. And we know and we have availability of heirloom seeds and to grow foods in our gardens. And so applying this knowledge gives us a lot of enjoyment and gets rid of fear of disease and gives us confidence and joy in our connection to the earth and appreciating the wonder and value of natural foods. So to the extent that a person deviates from natural foods and moves towards highly processed foods, including oils and flours and salts and sugars, and we destroy our chance to have a long and happy life.
I think what I was trying to say too is that folks think that, oh, I'll take a probiotic and then I can just eat at McDonald's and Subway and Taco Bell and then I'll be okay. So what I'm saying is eat the broccoli, eat the lentils, eat the mushrooms, and don't worry about the probiotics, right?
That's right. Especially when the food is organic and doesn't have pesticides and fungicides on it. Because then because it's, in other words, it's the food, it's the quality of the food, and the quality of the food is dependent on the quality of the soil. So and the greatest thing is to get organic vegetables and grow some of your own if you can, and get there's a certain link between all healthy centenarians, and is that link caloric restriction? Is it is it living in a blue zone? Is it what is this link? Is it being more social? What's one of the most powerful commonalities of long-lived people is gardening. Gardening. growing some of your own food, making healthy soil. So I'm like, have compost piles and kitchen scraps and weeds and, and mixing it with, and letting it rot and create, and then uncovering it and letting it cool off and putting worms in there and creating worm castings and compost and growing my own food in the compost I made and watching it's just like a great hobby, and it's so good for the human soul back in the World War I, our government promoted these victory gardens that people would grow their own food. And in World War II, it was up to like more than 40% of the American caloric consumption was foods that people grew in their own gardens. People grew a lot of their own foods. And throughout human history, the healthiest people always grew more of their own food,
That's something that I want to shoot for.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah. And you could always put a little grow box in your house if you're in an apartment somewhere and or you can always at least grow sprouts or microgreens.
That's what I started doing. Yes.
Yeah. At least have some connection with some of you with actually growing some of your own food.
Speaking of soil deficiency, my next question was about magnesium, and I read something recently about maybe a lot of people aren't absorbing magnesium because it's not in the soil as much. And I wonder your thoughts. Is it as prevalent as they're saying?
Yeah. When you're eating organic vegetables and fruits and beans and nuts, there are all tons of magnesium in there. When you're eating processed foods like bread and pasta and oils and meats, you're not getting much magnesium. But a Nutritarian diet is chock full of magnesium. But keep in mind, when people eat a high salt diet, they're putting so much salt on everything that the body loses salt through the sweat and loses salt in the urine. The salt's pouring out of you because you're taking in so much salt that the body has to try to eliminate all that salt. But the body can't eliminate the salt and just push out the extra sodium through the sweat and the urine. It has to push out other minerals with it. So you lose, potassium and magnesium and phosphorus and chloride. You lose a lot of nutrients as the body's releasing all the extra salt. Us Nutritarians don't have salt in our sweat. So we can play tennis and run 10 miles and in the heat, and we're not going to we'll drink water, but we're not going to get electrolyte deficient or get cramping because we're not losing electrolytes. We're not getting low in magnesium and potassium because we're not pushing out so much salt.
So that number is probably true then, because most Americans don't eat like us, so they probably really are deficient because they're all over-consuming salt.
They're over-consuming salt and over-consuming processed foods, and they're deficient in millions of different things.
Yeah.
And every time you eat, low-nutrient food, you become more deficient because the body utilizes vitamins and minerals, cofactors, to produce energy from carbohydrates. So when you take in white flour and sugar, you take in, empty calories, your body has to convert it for energy, is going to utilize your nutrient reserves, which then you don't have. You're not taking in nutrients with the food. When you take in an apple or a piece of mango or some oatmeal or some beans, it has the phytochemicals, the nutrients, the cofactors, the vitamins to convert it into energy. So your body is converting more of the bread into fat because your body can't efficiently convert it to energy. And then the energy you are getting from it, which make you feel lethargic and unmotivated, but the energy you are getting from it is stripping your body of nutritional reserve, and your body triages nutrients. Triage means it'll use the nutrients for its immediate needs, but it'll take it away from your storage or take it away from stabilizing your immune system, stabilizing stem cells and telomeres, preventing aging you faster. So you took away your ability to be healthy later on for your ability to stay alive right now. And so you have no future life because you're going to deteriorate very rapidly and age very rapidly. So us Nutritarians that are getting enough nutrients for our needs, but also for the needs of our stem cells, our longevity proteins, our telomeres, we're getting enough vitamins, minerals, phytochemicals, antioxidants to keep our body stable for for many, many decades.
Andy?
Yeah, so Dr. Fuhrman, I think one of the big things that I've taken away from your philosophy is we have so much more control over our health destiny and our health outcomes by the foods that we choose to eat. And that bad health and disease is not an inevitable thing. It's not even an inevitable thing for older people. And so I wanted to talk a little bit about Alzheimer's and dementia, because I feel like it's something that's really on the rise. And I've heard you talk about it, and it seems like people are getting it younger and younger. And I guess I want people to know that they don't have to have dementia when they're old, um, based on the food that they choose to eat. And I think that most people have that within, there's probably some genetic predisposition, but could you just talk a little bit about how most people can avoid getting these diseases when they're old?
Well, that's the beauty. The beauty of this is there's not one best diet to reverse heart disease, another one to lower blood pressure, another one to reverse diabetes. It's the same diet that lowers your blood pressure, prevents and reverses diabetes, and prevents and reverses heart disease. It's the same diet that prevents cancer. It's not a different my anti-cancer diet is the same as my anti-heart disease diet. And then what about, what's the food that has the most effect against heart disease? It's green vegetables. What's the food that has the most protection against dementia? It's green vegetables. What's the food that most protection against cancer? You got it, green vegetables. The point is, it's the same constellation of foods that protect against all these diseases. And the only thing wrong, and you add on to that the few nutrients that may be borderline low on a vegan diet, which are zinc, B12, and DHA predominantly. So to make sure as we age, as our zinc absorption goes down, and as your DHA needs, we idealize that. The only issue here with dementia is that it's your middle-aged omega-3 index from the ages of 40 to 70 that determines your risk of dementia in later life. You can't just start to fix it once you're 80 years old and expect your brain to be perfect. But in any case, so that's why it's so critical to get that omega-3 index, and something that the vegan community, many of people ignore. And I've had the experience of caring for vegan communities my whole career. The American Natural Hygiene Society, which morphed into the National Health Association, was something I was involved with as a teenager. When I became a physician, a lot of the elderly people of those groups came to me as patients, and a lot of them developed dementia and Parkinson's, because even though they were eating such a healthy diet, because they didn't pay attention to their omega-3 index. So I became very alarmed by that and very careful. And that's where I started, figuring out how I can fix that and the best way to fix it, because I saw so many people in trouble with that.
So you've seen
it's a
people who are
combination of a
otherwise,
Nutritarian diet with adequate B12 and omega-3 that gives us the protection from dementia we're looking for.
you've seen otherwise healthy people who ate like vegetarian diet their whole life that didn't get enough omega-3 get Alzheimer's and dementia.
That's correct. And Parkinson's and dementia, very commonly, I saw that, correct.
I've heard you talk about that. I'm talking about more people who eat Wonder Bread and donuts and
They're
all
all going to
junk.
get demented. They all lose mental function. But you don't see as much dementia there because they die so much younger. Because when you're eating that diet, the average age of death is around 78. So you're going to lose, you're not going to get as much dementia because they're already dead already. But when you eat a healthy diet, you get so many people living between 90 and 100 years old. So then you have more concern about mental function at that age. You follow me?
Yeah.
Because the other ones who just die, so you don't have to worry about dementia as much because they're dead. And the food doesn't taste that good once you're in the coffin, I always say.
Sure. I'm so glad we did this interview because I'm really excited to have my omega-3 test. I can't wait to see what the numbers are.
Yeah.
That leads me to the next question. I had a question about mercury and fillings because that's one of the things I can't control because I have all these fillings in my mouth, and a dentist told me a while ago I should have them replaced. And I'm wondering, do you think mercury, because you know how healthy I eat, do you think that plays a role in a person's health over the years? And I also have a root canal that I worry about as well.
I wouldn't worry about the root canal so much, but I don't think nobody should be putting mercury fillings in their mouth because there's so many other great options you could use today.
Right.
And as fillings wear out and need to be replaced, then use other substances or caps or something, and because the technology of dentistry has improved so much in recent years too. So I don't think a person should use mercury fillings at all. And if you're removing them, then you should use a rubber dam and a good suction so you're not exposed to the mercury dust when they're grinding it down.
Right.
So I would little by little over the years, remove them, or as they deteriorate or crack or need to be up to teeth. Never put a mercury. When's the last time you have a mercury fitting put in your mouth?
It was probably 10 years ago or so.
Yeah.
I think it's time is, I do worry about that. So,
Yeah.
yeah.
The exposure is so slow over the years, but it depends on how much fillings you have. But
Yeah, I
certainly,
have a lot of fillings. I ate a bad diet as a kid, so
yeah,
it's full of fillings, unfortunately.
right. Well, check your teeth and start to remove the ones that seem to be on the verge of deteriorating first.
Right.
Because some of them, to that many years, the teeth start to need a tune-up. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So
sure.
I would start on a long-term project of removing them from your mouth.
Yeah, I'm excited. I have my first appointment with the holistic dentist this coming week. So, yeah, so I'll start the
He's a
process.
holistic dentist. That means he eats a healthy diet.
I'm hoping.
And he eats healthily.
I'll find out. Andy, I think you have one more question.
Yeah, my last one is, so based on your influence and what I've learned from you over the years, and really changing my diet to a high quality diet. Superior nutrition is a term you always use, and I actually named my Facebook page "Transform Your Life with Superior Nutrition" because of you. But I just wanted to say that because of that, I do have a confidence now. I'm not afraid of getting sick anymore. I used to get sick. Oh, I get colds and sore throat and this and that, and
Me too.
but I was just eating whatever. And I'm not afraid of getting sick anymore. In fact, it's the last thing I suspect when something's wrong. I'm like, oh, like it never occurs to me that I'm sick until I'm actually have a cold. I'm like, all right, I guess I'm sick now.
Yeah.
I'm also confident that I'm going to live a long time. I would like to be 100 years old, and I think that's totally possible now. So what I'm getting at here is um, the food that we eat um, has a huge impact on our immune system. And with COVID and the vaccines and all this, um, the message seems to be for the mainstream of American people is eat whatever you want, but get a COVID shot and get a flu shot so you're protecting yourself. And I don't think people understand that when you get a cold, I get over a cold in a day now. I laugh at illness. Like, I mean, I don't laugh at it, but I mean, I'm not scared. It's crazy. I have this, it's like a superpower. And so I guess I think you do such a good job explaining how the food we eat affects our immunity. And, I don't have, I got COVID and I wasn't afraid that I had it. And some people are terrified. And I think there's good reason because
I know they're living with fear
every day. So
it's horrible, right? And as you know, that living with fear is not good for your long-term health. Just being afraid of cancer, having a heart attack, being a person eating a conventional diet is terrifying. I mean, when you think about the weapons of mass destruction on every street corner, people eating that stuff in fast food restaurants, and everybody they know has heart disease or in a nursing home or gets cancer. I mean, it's like they're being, who would want to live in such a dangerous neighborhood? Eating the foods other people eat and having to worry about disease, worry about being sick and being hurt. And then you think COVID could get you too anytime. Just a little bug like a COVID, and you're going to die if you get that disease. It's like they have no immune function, so of course they're at risk. It's crazy to put yourself at risk eating conventional food. Us Nutritarians, we don't worry about getting sick. Who cares if you get sick? You don't even get that sick. You get well so quickly, it's no big deal. I don't think I've missed a day of work in 40 years. But I think I did get COVID about a year and a half ago. I did feel weak and tired for about 3 days, but it was no big deal. Just felt weak and tired for a few days. But you don't but the whole point is don't live with fear, live with confidence. 100% what you're saying is absolutely true. And the same strong immune system that's built by these healthy foods protects us against cancer and protects us against bacterial infections and viral infections. And what's going to kill people if you don't get cancer and heart disease? Well, leading cause of death, centuries ago was infection, like pneumonias and flus that killed people when their immunity waned as they got older. And so having a strong immune system is critical. And you can't have even a normal immune system without a high intake of green vegetables, because the immune system is dependent on nutrients found in green vegetables. I always say, if you're not going to eat vegetables, you better live close to a hospital. It's funny because I love to snow ski and mogul ski and powder ski, and people buy these expensive houses, condos, and mansions on the side of the ski slopes. They can just hop right off out of their room and ski onto the slope, living on, and they pay like $5 million for these homes to be on the corner right next to the ski slopes. And I always think people should, like we conventionally, they should buy like expensive homes and condos right next to the hospitals, so they can take a tram or a zip line right across to the emergency rooms and go back and forth to their doctor offices, because their whole later life becomes running back and forth to doctor visits and taking drugs and going to pharmacies and going to doctors. And it's just the most sick life.
Yeah.
But they got to, it's a completely different life. We're close to nature and they're close to drugs and hospitals and doctors. I don't even go to doctors. I don't even go to myself.
That leads to my final question, because I love your sense of humor. One of my favorite jokes is how Al-Qaeda designed the standard American diet.
And you knew that when I went on PBS,
Yeah,
I pointed up that pie and I said, this diet's been designed by Al-Qaeda, and they dubbed it out.
Yep.
And they had a different voice come over and it said, this diet's been designed by, and then another person's voice said, Darth Vader. So number one, it's not my voice. Number two, it's not even funny. And number three, you ruined my joke. And what was wrong with this diet's been designed by Al-Qaeda? Why did they dub that out?
Right. So I wonder if you can end with one of your favorite jokes. I love them all, especially. I also remember one you said about Gilligan's Island. You knew it was fiction because Skipper was overweight.
I knew that it wasn't. He didn't really live on that island,
right?
Because Skipper, I finally figured that out with a lot of scientific thought. And exactly.
So if you just want to end with one of your jokes.
One of my jokes?
Yeah.
Okay.
Audience.
So this guy goes into a doctor's office and he says, hey, I got this sore throat. You got a cough. You got to take a look at my throat. And the receptionist takes him back to the room and says, the doctor will be with you in like 5-10 minutes, but just get undressed and sit on the edge of the table and he'll be in shortly. And he says, well, I don't need to get undressed because it's freezing in here anyway, but I'm just here for a sore throat. Can you just take a look at my throat and see what's wrong with me? And she goes, no, you have to get undressed or he's not going to see you. That's the way things are done here. So he says, okay, darn it, I'll get undressed. So he gets undressed. He sits on the edge of the table. He's on this cold paper. He's freezing and shivering. And 20 minutes go by and no doctor is there yet. He's still just sitting there nude at the end of his table for a so lousy sore throat. So he finally gets fed up. He creaks the door open and he sees in exam room 2 across the hall is another guy sitting nude at the end of the table. But he has this little cardboard box on his lap. And he says to him, I'm here freezing my butt off. No doctor. And I'm just here for a cough. And he says, I'm just here to deliver this package.
I love that. Thanks so much.
It's a stupid joke, but I love it.
No, it's great. I always love your sense of humor. It, really, whenever you give a presentation, I love everything about it. So
smiling makes you live longer too, even if it's a stupid
that's
joke.
another thing. Laughter supporting.
Yeah, laughing and having fun, and also we care about things and we have good feelings for things. And when you're more a junk food eater and you're an addict, it takes away your care for things outside of yourself, and you become overly consumed with instant gratification, just whatever's going to stimulate you at the moment, and it makes you less creative of being in tune with and interested in the outside world, people, things, the clouds, nature. You're more consumed when you're an addict in getting your addictions met, and your body becomes more narrow. And I think that unhealthy eating leads to more bizarre thinking. And in the southern United States, for example, where they have more murders and more crime and more younger life death and more bizarre thinking and poor intellectual achievement and worse and poor income and more people supporting like Trumpism and racism and more bizarre thinking, conspiracy thinking and craziness. So I think that a lot of the political climate in this country today has been affected by fast food and unhealthy, and some of those states with we're more supporting more bizarre thinking and without, you know what I mean? It affects the way people's ability to think, not just logically and rationally, but to also have long-term thinking, what's best for our future, of our children, of our future generations. How do we protect the planet best? How do we protect ourselves for the future? It's more about what their immediate needs are. You know what I mean? So I do think that, like, there was a high amount of pellagra after the Civil War. And pellagra is a niacin deficiency disease that causes homicidal, suicidal, aggressive, violent behavior, enhanced the lynching of blacks in those days, because the white Caucasian males their thinking was affected by nutritional deficiencies. And we're seeing the same thing today: more propensity for violence, anger, behavior, political extremism, and short-term thinking due to broad, ubiquitous nutritional deficiencies.
I love your book, Fast Food Genocide. That was my favorite book of yours.
Thank you. Yeah, I think it's an important book that people need to read. But it's funny. It's not one of my best-selling books, by the way. I have 7 New York Times best-selling books, and that's not one of the bestsellers, even though it should be.
Such an important message.
Yeah.
I like that you got more into like social and historical context. It wasn't just nutrition. It was but yeah, pellagra. I didn't even know about pellagra. I was just gonna say that this was so much fun. This was like a dream come true to meet you and hear all this good information. And also, I got my wife your Talia's dessert book for Christmas. She loves the ginger cookies,
cool.
Which are, it's like it's good, all good ingredients in there, dates and stuff like that. And but no, this was so much fun. It was just like an honor to meet you, and thanks so much.
Terrific. Well, have a great month and look forward to seeing you guys again sometime.
Yeah, definitely. Thanks so much.
All right. Bye-bye.
Yep. Bye.